Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, February 2nd, 2025. Today, joining us is our illustrious panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Publication, Zach Richardson, our member from Texas and leader of the Texas Transhumanist Party, Alan Crowley, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, our Director of Scholarship, Dan Elton, and our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer. So welcome to our Transhumanist Party panelists. And just joining us is Adam Gries, who is the founder of the Vitalism movement and the Vitalism Foundation, here to discuss a fascinating upcoming 8-week longevity zone called Vitalist Bay in Berkeley, California. Vitalist Bay will bring the concept of a longevity pop-up city to the Bay Area and will feature discussions and events pertaining to longevity science, advocacy, and policy, as well as artificial intelligence, health optimization, cryonics, network states, and more. And indeed, this will be a gathering of many of the leading thinkers, scientists, activists, philosophers in the longevity realm, in the pursuit of radical life extension. I will be there in late May, the weekend of May 24th through the 26th, representing the U.S. Transhumanist Party, and I will be discussing how our forward-thinking vision of putting science, health, and technology at the forefront of American politics can catalyze the advances in longevity science that will enable us to reach longevity escape velocity in our lifetimes. For now, Adam, welcome. Please tell us more about Vitalist Bay, what the premise behind it is, what people can expect, what you're looking forward to. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Gennady, and good to see everybody here today. Thank you for taking your time to join us. So context for Vitalist Bay, many of you probably already have heard about Vitalism, maybe in a previous salon. And Vitalism is the movement to end aging and death, or death and aging, where aging is the primary cause of death. And so that's our first priority. And when we approach that, we have a particular perspective, which is that humans have agency. And therefore, we should try hard to do something about the situation, and we should do that in a way that leverages technology and science. So that's really kind of the context for vitalism. And so then you may ask, okay, well, why do a kind of longevity zone or a high density coming together like what we're doing at Vitalist Bay? And the answer is that we have been seeking high leverage opportunities to find inflection. So when I say high leverage, what I mean is really a situation where you can invest some energy, capital, human resource, other type of energy, and get an asymmetrical outcome. And so, when we say outcome, that could be resourcing, could be new initiatives, new policies and regulations, new connections being made, new capital being brought in. And so I'll just say, what is Vitalist Bay? And then I can discuss a little bit of why we think Vitalist Bay satisfies this goal of creating asymmetric opportunities. So Vitalist Bay is an 8-week longevity zone in Berkeley, California, arguably the epicenter or right near the epicenter of innovation in the US in technology and to a substantial degree in biology as well, or biotech. And during these 8 weeks, the idea is that we will bring together the largest number of people ever to a longevity event in person. The goal is to cross at least 4,000 people, and that's very material. And each of these 8 weeks will have a different theme, as Gennady noted. So they span every concern from our perspective that's major in longevity, from what's possible in the here and now. That would be the first week, ending with a conference named Unlimited Health Conference. And so the kind of things that will be discussed at that conference and in the context of any side events during that week would be things that can be done right now or are coming down the pipe very soon. Things like stem cell usage, peptides, interventions, better data analysis, better solutions for concierge medicine or longevity clinics and so forth. Now, some of these things could have an impact on the aging process. Some of them, the jury is still out on, but they are things that people can do right now to improve their health span and their well-being. So we think those are, of course, important. The second week will be about longevity science. This is more like what you would expect from an ARDD type conference or week. It'll bring together things that, while focused on translation, we're doing this in collaboration with a biomarkers consortium in terms of the programming. We'll bring PIs, professors, scientists, but also companies that are spanning that kind of gap between the lab and earlier attempts at translation. So usually things that may be like 2 to 8 years out in the traditional kind of timeline. Week 3 is decentralized science and network states. And of course, the conference therein will have a lot of people from the crypto community. As you know, there's been a lot more attention, especially since the recent elections in the US, and a lot of capital flowing into decentralized science and different efforts, whether they be VitaDAO, HydroDAO, CryoDAO, HairDAO, and many other initiatives to do science better, but also relay capital in ways that are more innovative or more risk-loving or open-minded to things that are underfunded. The fourth week is called Longevity Era, and that's a headline conference. It brings together a convergence of all the concerns, and that'll have a lot of the folks who are pretty well known, from Matt Caperline to Peter Diamandis, Kristen Fortney, and Tim Urban, and many others, from all concerns. So this will really combine everything from cryopreservation to DSci to longevity science to the here and now, et cetera. And it's a 3-day conference. Typically, conferences are 2 days on Saturday and Sunday. I neglected to mention it, but the whole idea of the zone, it's basically a converted hotel, which serves as a campus for us, called Lighthaven in Berkeley. And 50 to 70 people can live there continuously, meaning they actually sleep, eat, and reside on the premises. And during the week, typically, the campus will be used for work. It's not going to be a constant conference. The conferences will be held on the weekends. This was also intentionally done to allow people to come from out of town if they have other obligations. Sometimes the conferences may spill into a Friday or a Monday, but typically not. You can see this all on the website, vitalistbay.com. So we were on conference 4. Conference 5 is for investors. Investors conference. Conference 6 is in week 6 is about AI and biology. And I'm sure we can speak about that in more detail later. But my perspective is that AI is going to eat a lot of biology, and also that biology driven by AI may actually be the primary lever where we may want to focus. It's certainly a topic worthy of debate, meaning should we, if the AI tools are going to really dramatically accelerate our ability to do science, should we, instead of trying to do biology with the limited tools we have now, do things that would amplify or serve the kind of AI tools that are coming down the pipe, be they with data, automations of different types, lab automations, and so forth? I think these are really interesting questions. Week 7 is biostasis, so cryopreservation and replacement. So regenerative medicine, but more on the replacement side. So replacing organs, replacing entire bodies, and so forth. And finally, the final week is about policy, communications, and ethics. And that's, of course, the one where Gennady is going to be speaking, and many others, trying to bridge this gap between policy, regulations, communications, and on the science and the changes we want to see. So to bring that all together, okay, so you have these themes, you have these conferences, each of which can attract substantial groups of people. And our thesis here is really well summarized in the slogan, which is longevity's new capital. We believe that we need to allocate a lot more resources in every sense to the science and technology to solve the root cause of aging, and thereby to make a big progress in our efforts versus death. And so how does this matter? Well, number one, today, I would challenge anybody here, and I'd love to hear perspectives on this, to name one place which is longevity's capital globally. I don't know that there is such a place. The largest conference for science is probably ARDD, and it's in Denmark. This is really quite unusual, considering the US is by far the biggest funder of biomedical research through the NIH and other government entities, not to speak of the private sector, where the majority of biotech's funding goes to the US. I mean, this is really quite interesting, right? Why is the largest conference for longevity in the world not, for example, in Boston? I mean, that would be a more, I guess, predictable kind of place, but it's not. And then you may ask, well, okay, and what about these other conferences? So everything from DSci or AI in biology or policy. I mean, a lot of these topics, I would say, don't even have a conference in the context of longevity. There are AI conferences, yes. There's SynBio Beta about synthetic biology and so forth. But the allocation of attention to longevity is really quite limited. It's often a carve out within some larger conference and doesn't receive its own treatment. And so when you think about that, this is really an opportunity to define both the physical space, which we think is very natural for the Bay Area, and then secondly, create this convergence and density. And to do it in the place which has, accessibility to maximum levers of influence. And that means capital, financial capital in the Bay Area, human capital, and regulatory and policy capital, which arguably after the last election has really gravitated to a greater degree to the Bay Area because of the techno-libertarian wing of the Republican Party, whatever one may think, which now has a very substantial presence at every level of the US government. And so those are really the key motivators. And maybe I'll just add as a final point that we talk about asymmetrical outcomes. Conferences and bringing people together are often the source of these kind of outcomes because they connect dots that otherwise wouldn't meet. And that means people instigating new initiatives, connecting capital to such initiatives, educating people who are not sufficiently aware of longevity or opportunities, but would incidentally come across them because of the reduced friction of having everything in high proximity and high density. This is extremely important. For anybody here who hasn't lived in the Bay Area, I think it's very easy to underestimate, often by an order of magnitude, the impact of the network density here. Somebody comes to your event, they like it, you don't know really much about them. They're maybe an engineer at a big tech co. Turns out their friend is a billionaire tech entrepreneur. And so they come the following week. This is only possible if you have continuity for an event. If you just have a 3-day conference or a 6-day conference, you just don't get that spillover, which is so material, so critical from the network density of the Bay Area, which is actually what I would say is the highest leverage point of the Bay Area, which is hard to replicate elsewhere. This generational wealth of humans who have capital, experience, connections, and so forth. And that's really what we're trying to tap into. And so I'll stop there.
Yes, thank you very much, Adam. I think this was a great overview, and we are getting some enthusiastic feedback from our viewers already. Daniel Tweed, our 2024 vice presidential candidate, writes, "This is an exciting format for a conference like a live-in design sprint. And he also points out, interestingly enough, the United Federation of Planets headquarters in Star Trek was also in the Bay Area. Walter Crompton writes that he hopes to see a lot of us there on week 6, which will discuss the intersection of AI and biology. I also want to remind everybody to visit the website of Vitalist Bay. This is vitalistbay.com. And here is the page to join the waitlist. It's vitalistbay.com/waitlist. And I have some good news for those who are members of the US Transhumanist Party. If you sign up for Vitalist Bay, you can get $100 off using the special code USTP Bay. And the way you are also going to be able to expedite your processing through the wait list is by entering USTP as the answer to the question, how did you hear about Vitalist Bay? So that means the wait list will not be as much of a wait list for you. And with the code USTP Bay, you will get $100 off. I also have the website pulled up here so you can see the graphic design is quite nice, and you will see images of what the event is likely to look like, some statistics about attendees and residents, also links to apply to join the wait list, and information about many of the speakers who will be attending. These should be some familiar names to many of you, and some previous guests of our virtual enlightenment salons are here. For instance, Professor Robert Hanson will be in attendance, Kai Micah Mills will be in attendance, and many others. Jean Hébert, Dr. Jean Hébert, author of Replacing Aging. Adam, of course. David Goebel, whom we had a salon with in 2021. And Dr. John Davis, philosophy professor. We also had a fascinating conversation with him. Dr. Ingemar Patrick Linden, the author of The Case Against Death. We had an excellent salon with him. So many renowned individuals who are also closely connected with our community, who are friends of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Mark Hamalainen, a friend of mine, the founder of the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, and now a fellow resident of Northern Nevada. And here I am, by the way. So I will be speaking during week 8. So please, everybody, attend. Memorial Day weekend is a great opportunity to travel because it is a 3-day weekend for many individuals. And there are just so many other speakers here whom I hope to connect with and bring on as future Virtual Enlightenment Salon guests. So this is quite exciting. Now, Adam, if you could tell us a bit more about the facility at Vitalist Bay, the Lighthaven campus. I think a lot of our viewers will be interested.
Sure. And actually, I wonder, would it be possible for me to share my screen? Should I try to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Please share your screen, and then I'll elevate it to the main stream here.
What I'm going to do is actually, I'm actually going to share the Lighthaven website, because they have a kind of nice layout there. I mean, it would be the same as what I would use regardless. Let me just see if I can do that. So here we go. Let's see. Screen sharing. I'm not sure. Let me see if this will work. Okay. So do you see my screen? This is the Lighthaven campus from an aerial view?
It is visible right now.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'll just explain what this is more or less. So this is the primary campus. It consists of 6 buildings or so. You see here this, and this. And there's also one more building which is off campus, but walkable. It's still part of the residence offering that we have. People who will be residents, and there are some spots left, although they're running out at this point, will be living in one of these houses. These houses have large common spaces. There's the converted hotel, as noted previously. And then you have these open spaces outside the residences. So what we're going to have during the event is here on top, we're going to have right here, you see this, what I'm marking right now, this area? Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So this area is going to be the keynote area. That can hold up to around 1,000 people. And then you're going to have these other areas. So there will be some internal halls in the buildings, which will be open to attendees of the events. And then there will be these common areas. So there are common areas here, which will largely be used for dining and so forth. And then there are common areas. This is one massive common area here on the bottom right. And and a parking lot here, which you will also see, right? And then you have these areas in the front, right here, and over to the side. Now, these small buildings that you see from this aerial view, they're actually very cool nooks where people can sit down, chat, have a more intimate situation. The space was designed with this in mind by the rationalist community. And then during the event, what you can expect is this concept which we call villages. We haven't actually spoken about this publicly, so this is the first time that I'm sharing this. But the idea is that we want to give people who are attending an elevated, incredible educational and health positive experience when they attend. So in these open areas, there will be these, what we call villages. And the villages will focus on different aspects of health and longevity. So for example, sleep village, skin village, biomarker village, sexual health and fertility village, and so forth. And each one of these villages will have educational materials, information about the cutting edge research, as well as companies or other folks who are doing stuff and want to share more with people who attend. Beyond that, there will be in those open areas activities led by instructors. So when you go to this event, what you can expect is, yes, some of the most thoughtful, I would say, leading thinkers who will be speaking, but also an experiential set of offerings that include both education and information and the opportunity to learn about different products that are coming into the market, but also activities from ecstatic dance to physical activity to meditation and so forth. And I'll just mention as a final note that, you know, one of the, just as an example, one of the things that I find is really underexplored when we talk about life extension is what does it mean to be? And so that's also going to be something that we address at this conference, right? This has to do, there are different perspectives about this, right? Certainly the Buddhists and in meditation, there's some idea of what is the I, what is continuity of self, which is exactly what we're talking about when we say life extension. Well, what are we extending, right? And the same could be said from the neuroscientific perspective, and the same could be said from, for example, interventions with psychedelics or other states of consciousness that people explore. I find it actually really remarkable that this topic is never explored in the context of people who purport to want to extend whatever that is, because it really is fundamental to that. And that's it. Hand it over to back to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Adam, for that overview. And I, of course, am quite fascinated with this question of I-ness. I have an essay from 2010 called How Can I Live Forever? What Does and Does Not Preserve the Self? A lot of our viewers are familiar with this essay, but I will link it in the YouTube chat shortly. I will also say what you describe is fascinating because it will provide the attendees essentially the opportunity to customize their experience at Vitalist Bay. So with these villages, they can focus on the aspects that they find most intriguing or most relevant to them and essentially go down those pathways of exploration, whether they're interested in optimizing some aspect of their personal health or delving into philosophical questions or advancing the research into rejuvenation biotechnology or replacement or cryonics. They will have the opportunity to do that. So I think this has the potential to bring together a really diverse range of people within our movement and have them interact with one another, people who were focused or specialized in one area or one set of pursuits would have the opportunity to converse with those who are focused in other areas. And to a great extent, of course, we have tried to do that virtually via our enlightenment salons, and this is how we have brought so many fascinating guests on this program for now over 4.5 years. But the in-person networking opportunities certainly provide another dimension of this. Now, given how many people are going to be there, perhaps over 4,000 attendees, do you have any thoughts, especially for people who are going to sign up in the near future, about accommodations and where they should stay? You described the Lighthaven campus, but I'm thinking a few hotels nearby will probably be utilized extensively as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And we intend to put up more information on the website. We're still 2 months and something ahead of the first opening, but it is becoming tighter, and I know that people want to make their travel plans. So a couple notes on that. Number one, as many of you know, Berkeley has the eponymous university there, which is the number one public institution in the U.S., and graduation is in May. Our event is from April 4th to May 29th. So you can imagine, and it's typically mid-May, a lot of the graduation ceremonies and so forth. So the times that are going to be hardest to book anything are probably going to be like the end of the first week to the second, third weeks of May. April will likely be quite a lot easier. There are a variety of hotels within 10 minutes walking or 15 minutes walking from the venue. The Graduate Hotel, that's a Hilton property, the Shattuck Hotel, which is nearby in downtown Berkeley. I suggest just opening Google Maps and looking for hotels in the area. At this point, there is quite a lot of availability, but I do believe that there is some urgency, at least to decide in the next 3-4 weeks. Secondly, we are in discussions to potentially get a larger amount of additional lodging options for attendees. And it would be interesting if you are applying, if you add in the additional notes, if you'd be looking to share accommodation. There are different types of accommodation. There are Airbnbs, of course, but then, these are not your hotel rooms. And so then if some of those properties are secured, there would be probably sharing involved, right? It's a different kind of setup. And so that's all I would say on that front for now. We're keenly aware that people want to get more information there, and we'll also do our best to put up what we can.
Yes, thank you very much, Adam. And our friend Rudy Hoffman, who is also a previous Virtual Enlightenment Salon guest, has highlighted that there will be a week focusing on cryonics at this event. My understanding is that's week 7, the Biostasis Conference, May 16th through the 22nd. So thank you for pointing this out, Rudy. And Rudy also wonders, is there any sort of official event hotel, or is Lighthaven the only official venue at this point, and then attendees get to select their own hotel nearby?
Great question. Right now, there is no official event hotel. We are exploring that, but I wouldn't wait for it because it's just not guaranteed that we'll find a hotel which is necessarily a fit. The context here being especially the graduation situation, which may make some hotels, let's say, open to guaranteeing the size of blocks that we would be looking for only for a limited time. So it would also, if there is such a thing, it may also depend on the specific week. That's where it stands for now.
Yeah, if I could jump in.
Yes, please.
Dan here. Thanks for joining us, Adam. I know you're probably really busy, so appreciate you taking the time. And I'm looking at I'm trying to figure out my plans right now actually. And when I have attended events at Lighthaven in the past, like the one of the Foresight. Vision weekends, I think, and more recently the Manifest conference and the Less Wrong summer camp. And I think it's a fantastic venue for intimate conversations. Because with a lot of conferences, like traditional academic conferences, what people always say is the value is really with the networking and the one-on-one conversations and the free flow of information, right? Unfortunately, what happens is that people get kind of trafficked into sitting in lecture halls most of the time. And it really isn't the best use of time because a lot of the information being presented, you probably already know. It's just, you can have a lot more. So the way that events are run at Lighthaven is really geared towards smaller, having a calendar with many different options so you can pick the option that's best for you. Smaller groups, which are more conducive to conversations. When you have a large group, it's just, it's impossible really. So yeah, and then they have all these little nooks and niches where people can have one-on-one sidebars if they want, right? So I think that I think it's a whole new model for how conferences can be run, and I wish that academic conferences would look into this. I know there are some conferences like the Gordon conferences, which try to create this more intimate atmosphere where people have more freedom to kind of just mix and mingle. But yeah. So anyway, I think I just wanted to explain that to the viewers because I think we have some people that may not be familiar. And the other thing I was going to just add, if it's okay, is as far as the hotels, I would just say, you know, if you're looking to save money, like I spent a lot on travel last year, so I'm kind of a little sensitive to how much I'm spending. And I would just say, look a little bit further away. I've stayed at the Shattuck Hotel, and it's a great hotel, but it's a little bit expensive. Where I've stayed is the Marriott in downtown Oakland. And it's right. That's my like go-to hotel whenever I visit the Bay Area, like the Berkeley now. It's right off the BART metro, so you can literally walk out the hotel, walk 100 feet, get in the BART, and then go up to I forget the station, but
Prevail or
the next one I think, but. You get out and walk 15 minutes and you're at Lighthaven. So that's why I would recommend it. Or you could even look further, up north at Airbnb in Haywood or whatever it's called to the north. Don't get disenchanted by the hotels being too expensive right near the venue. That's what I would say. And there's always Airbnbs as well. And also, look for people that might be able to host you. So, yeah, anyway, I did have a question for Adam. I guess there's something I wanted to hear just more about.
Please.
But
yeah.
Sorry, it's a little bit out of sorts, but I know. So I'm coming to the realization also that given the complexity of biology and just the way the complexity of the data sets, the way our data sets are so confusing and messy and everything, we really need AI to sort all this through. In some of the research I'm doing, we're looking at using AI just to, like, large language models, just to normalize data, like extracting, just extracting blood biomarker data from unstructured reports. Mm-hmm. AI is really helpful for that. But in the future, it's also literally just going to do research for us, either using observational data or directing like cloud laboratories and stuff. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that, because I feel like that's, I noticed you have a whole week on AI.
Yeah,
but I just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I guess that where we are right now is I'm not even aware of a coherent effort. There have been a few blog posts, but a coherent effort to unpack the vectors of exploration that would be the highest leverage and what kind of inputs they would require. So when we talk about, like AI scientists, right? In biology, that's concomitant with the lab automation and potentially whether humanoid robots or other kind of control mechanisms that would allow creating a hypothesis, implementing it, and then effectively collecting the data. Now, I think it's intuitively clear to many here that a robot carrying out a lot of these things instead of a human is going to be much superior, right? Less chance of contamination, more accuracy, and so on and so forth. But many of these, let's say, labs, automated labs or roboticized labs, have not lived up to their promise so far. I mean, there have been robots in labs for 15, 20 years, but they were often sitting on the side and not actually even being utilized to their full capacity. So I think that's like one important vector. Then another important vector is like, what kind of data are we collecting? And sometimes the data that's been collected is just very limited. So, we have these biobanks, the biobanks themselves, they may have some metadata, maybe not the type that you want. You can't go back to the specimens and do additional assays on them in most cases. And so how do we collect large amounts of data, and what kinds of data? Is it whole genome sequencing? Is it other associated metadata and other metabolomic or other omic data of different types? I feel like there's a massive, massive opportunity to do that, and AI needs that data, right? It's kind of, I find it really ironic because, of course, Ilya Sutskever recently said that data is the fossil fuel of AI, but of course, biology contains like orders of magnitude more data that would be materially useful for the kind of things that we care about. And really, when people say, "Oh, we will eradicate disease," well, how exactly are you going to do that without the data, right? So I think that's a really important area. And then that leads to the question of like, well, okay, let's say we realize that we do need the data. Is there a story which is a financially viable story where we can say, okay, we can invest, X million dollars, X billion dollars in this data, and there will be some return in terms of the value that is incremental to our efforts, such that we can justify additional investment from private sources that are profit seeking, rather than just relying on philanthropic money or government money. Because if you ask somebody like George Church, he'll tell you he is in shock that still in 2025, we haven't yet genome sequenced the entire human population at the cost that genome sequencing is today. And so where's that money going to come from? How would it be deployed, and what are the priorities? I think is actually something that I would look to unpack during AI Bio Week and maybe even produce some report or output to that. And we're thinking about creating some working group or groups that would be working in tandem with that week.
I think that we will need AI to conduct experiments. We can't just rely on these biobanks. There's the UK Biobank, and I've been looking at this other one at NIH called All of Us. And there's a lot of data there it's not really being utilized right now. They've got like 250,000 genome sequences and a lot of electronic health records. And I think there's a lot that probably can be learned from it, but there are a lot of biases in that data and how it's collected. And there was a study where they tried to replicate a lot of known genome phenotype associations using the All of Us data, and they were able to replicate about 60%. So 40% of these quote established or known or previously reported associations they couldn't replicate. So I think there's a lot of limits to just using this sort of observational data. I think there's a thinking that, we just give AI access to all the electronic health records, it's going to like figure everything out. That I don't think that's how it's going to work. It's going to have to do its own controlled experiments. And so I hope that's something that gets discussed, because I have been seeing that a little bit missing. There's a little bit of a sense of I feel like there's a sense of sort of almost like wishful thinking about it. Like, Dario Amodei had this, I've just heard this wishful thinking that, AI is going to solve everything. But the AI has to be able to interface with the real world and be integrated with a lab. And that's someone's going to do all that work, right? That's a lot of work. People underestimate the work involved in real world deployment and integration and everything. And it's not like just magically going to pop out of this genie. So I think we need to buckle down and really focus, like you said, focus on the, what needs to be done, the work that needs to be done. We heard this from Dario Amodei a couple weeks ago. I think he said that AI could double the human lifespan in, I think he said like
10 years
or something.
He said five years, I believe.
5 years. Yeah, that's right. 5 years.
By the way, keep in mind, the operative word is could, right? I mean, people use this kind of language, and by the way, the specific language that was quoted in the article, not that clickbaity title, which is a summarization, which is, I think, intentionally misleading. It's almost fake news level, right? AI could double the human lifespan in 5 years. Okay, what did Dario exactly said? He said it wouldn't be crazy to think that AI could double the lifespan. Okay, so he was basically almost, that kind of colorful language is almost this kind of offhanded remark that says, oh, we don't know the bounds of what this AI could do. It could be like unbelievable because intelligence at that level, et cetera, married with certain types of embodiment, which are already coming online, whether they be these robots and other mechanisms, could identify really amazing things. But it's like, all right, well, I mean, sure, like maybe it's a 1% chance or a 0.0001% chance. It's not physically impossible. It's just like, I feel unfortunately that you're, and just to bring it back to what you said about people falling into this kind of hand waving hopium around AI will just solve everything. I think that a lot of the media, unfortunately, stokes that fire, not because of a nefarious motive, but because it draws clicks. And so it kind of tells this story, and nobody gets into the concrete details of how will it actually be more likely to do this if we are operative agents to support it. And so 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's it's missing. Like I said, people think that you just give AI all the access to all the data sets and boom, but that is going to figure everything out. But it's going to have to do its own experiments. It's going to have to collect a lot more data because there's just a lot of biochemical pathways that we literally don't really understand. Like our knowledge, biology is just so complicated that it's going to have to do a lot of work.
And by the way,
set up all the infrastructure.
just to add to that, I would say two things. One, the Bay Area is the epicenter of the AI revolution, at least in the US and arguably globally. So getting more people who are involved in such companies. I mean, when I go out here to like dinner parties or other events, I think I literally meet people who work at OpenAI or other key AI companies literally every time, different people. So if you're talking about trying to engage with people who actually are touching the technology and may be interested in bio and longevity, this is an ideal way to interface with them, be it to inform them better or to spin off new initiatives or to identify what it is that the technology can actually do. So that's one aspect of this. And the other aspect is that, when we think about data, there's the type of data that would lend itself, and I didn't mention this before, to simulation of biology. And so that data also, how do you collect it? What do you need to collect? Is it single cell level or multi-cell level and so forth? And I think also here, there's a very limited intersection yet, because this is so new, between the people who know how biology works, at least so far, and the people who know how AI works.
Yeah, it sounds right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And I think these are the kinds of fascinating conversations that will be held in even much greater depth during the AI and Biology Week, which will be from May 9th to the 15th, with the main conference being held on May 9th and 10th. I will also note, for those who are interested in following the threads of this discussion to a greater extent, please check out our longevity fireside chat with Mark Hamalainen, whom I mentioned earlier, and Anastasia Yegorova. I met with them at the previous incarnation of their Longevity Lodge in Lake Tahoe, and this was one of the areas we discussed. And Mark pointed out that in order to effectively produce results that are relevant to the real world, AI needs a lot of real world data. And for instance, for images or for text, AI has had huge amounts of data fed into it because humans have been generating text and images literally for millennia. And for biological research, especially in many of the areas we are interested in, how to prolong lifespan or health span, the data are still much more limited and emerging, and we need more data from real world experiments, physical experiments in the lab, to feed into the AI systems. I'm actually quite fascinated by this project from the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation called RAID, the Rodent Aging Interventions Database, which is the most detailed compilation to date of at least the vast majority of the research studies that are known on mouse lifespan and various experiments to apply interventions and which interventions worked and to what extent. So perhaps databases like RAID could be utilized together with AI systems to derive certain insights, but also the wet experiments need to continue because we don't know what we don't know. And especially with combination interventions, that is a very recent field. The Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation is also close to the conclusion of the first robust mouse rejuvenation study, where there are 2 mice alive right now out of 1,000. That is the latest information that I have. And the study began in early 2023. So we're going to have some more complete insights into what interventions worked, what interventions didn't work so well. But LEVF is currently raising funds for the second robust mouse rejuvenation study, and we need a lot more financial support for this kind of work so that the AI systems could have data, especially about combination interventions that could be extended for purposes of lengthening our own lifespans, hopefully.
That's amazing. I wanted to share a thought really riffing off of that, which is around the collection of data and the convergence of what people may think about as health span stuff and this research. So I'll give 3 or 4 examples. So one example is I've been thinking about gene data as potential useful foundation for discovery, and specifically about centenarian genomes. So as you may know, the largest database of centenarian genomes only has a few thousand samples, whereas globally there are today alive, arguably between 500,000 and 1 million centenarians, or anybody over 100 years old. And of course, a lot more who are 99, 98, 97, many of whom are actually very highly predicted to make it later, right? Because if you're 98, if you are very highly functioning at 98, that already puts you in a tiny percentage of 98-year-olds, which is much more likely to make it to 99 and so forth. But in that context, there are other sources of data. For example, many here may have heard of the short sleeping genes. Some people can sleep only 4 hours a night and perform normally and have normal lifespans. And it's arguable whether, sleeping less is living more. It depends who you ask about, what you consider sleep to be. But that's also a kind of a potential superpower that we may want to explore or unlock. Well, guess who has that data? Whoop and Aura. They know who these short sleepers are. This is not a question. But have they worked with anybody to get that data to try to sequence the genomes of those people? I'm willing to bet that nobody has even had that conversation with them. And it only occurred to me that they had that data just last week when I was, thinking about this. And so there is definitely a convergence between some of the type of phenotypic data that we're collecting and the utility of the underlying biology that we may be able to probe much more deeply. And I'll give one more example on this, which is we had our Longevity State Conference in Valencia, Spain last year in May. And during that conference, we thought it would be cool to collect blood for the Open Cures blood bank. And so we set up a blood drawing station there. And we had, nurses and doctors collecting blood. And I don't know if you guys want to guess, but I'll let people imagine what percentage of people who attended actually gave blood. Think in your mind what you think that percentage was, and I'll just say what it was. It was about 35%. So out of 100 people, something like 35 gave blood. Now, of course, these are pre-selected and rather, let's say, motivated. But just in that context, we will have a phlebotomist on campus full-time during the entire 8 weeks. And we intend to draw blood at Vitalist Bay. So if you think about that as an example, what if we could draw blood from 1,000 people? I mean, that would be pretty crazy. And bank it or use it for research or use it for all sorts of needs. And at the same time, we're going to make available different types of tests. So, tests that people are familiar with, maybe a microplastics test or other blood tests and so forth, which you can get directly on campus. And so I feel like there is an opportunity to essentially marry these things, which unfortunately until today have not been married. People basically say, okay, I'll go to this event and it's about healthspan. and they get like a speed of aging test, etc. But there's no utility for progressing the science in that, unfortunately. It's just selling a product. And of course, there's nothing wrong with some of these products. They might educate the person getting them and so forth. But I think we could do so much more than that. And Vitalist Bay is trying to push the envelope and welcomes any ideas that would help achieve that.
Yes, indeed. There will be so much excitement at Vitalist Bay that blood will be drawn. Thank you, Adam. I think, yes. It is fascinating that these kinds of events do give people the opportunity to gain very personalized insights into their own health, but also in doing so, they help to arrive at broader insights that could aid scientific research or aid us in understanding perhaps what lifestyle practices could increase longevity or what future research avenues would be fruitful. So I'm glad that this will be a part of Vitalist Bay. I'll also point out, I wish I were one of the people who could function optimally on 4 hours of sleep, because that would be a major boost to my productivity. Now, there are, of course, notable people in the longevity community, Brian Johnson being the foremost among them, who recommends that people very rigorously adhere to an 8-hour sleep schedule. So it will be interesting, certainly, to have these kinds of conversations and explore to a greater extent what the science suggests about how much sleep is desirable for the vast majority of us who don't have that special gene, and furthermore, how to realistically attain that kind of sleep and still engage in the kinds of activities that we need to for our daily lives, but moreover, that we should be engaging in to promote radical life extension. Many of us are in a situation where we have full-time occupations, but we know this is important, and we know that to live materially longer than people do today, we need to put forth some effort, and that means spending a lot of our spare time essentially advocating for radical life extension, looking into the science, attending events. So finding that balance, I think, is an important area of conversation that should be had at Vitalist Bay. Now, I also wanted to ask you, Adam, to what extent Vitalist Bay is inspired by previous events. The concept of the longevity pop-up city really originated in late 2023 with Zuzulu in Montenegro. And then in 2024 in Roatan, which is an island off the coast of Honduras, a longer-term pop-up city called Vitalia was formed, and Zach was kind enough to share a website that announced some recent events in Vitalia. My understanding is since that time, Vitalia has essentially split in two, and the city on Roatan is now going to be called Infinita. It's run by Nicholas Unzinger, and his previous collaborator, partner, Lawrence Ion, is going to found another longevity city called Viva City. There was also a pop-up city called Zellar City in Berlin, Germany. And furthermore, Vitalism has held various events as well. You mentioned a longevity network state conference, and our friend Luis Arroyo also attended a Vitalist event in New York City, which he mentioned in the chat. And I asked Luis to share some further impressions of that event. He wrote that it brought out different types of members from the longevity community, ranging from foreigners doing business in the city to New Yorkers from different boroughs, ideologies, and interests. So there was this opportunity for getting these people to connect and collaborate and share ideas. So let us know what lessons Vitalist Bay has drawn from these various events, and also how you're hoping to break new ground with Vitalist Bay.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly, we think that, or I think, and the folks who are organizing Berkeley Bay think that the work done at Zuzulu and Vitalia is great and inspiring in the sense that it showed that you could bring a substantial group of people into a venue for an extended period. With that being said, there's a big difference between Vitalist Bay, which we would say is the first longevity zone, versus pop-up cities. And it has to do with a foundational idea. A pop-up city typically is intended to simulate a kind of communal experience which cities or towns of different types have during a period. Whereas Vitalist Bay is a zone in the sense that the people who engage at Vitalist Bay will be primarily from outside the zone. So you could think about it like almost like maybe more of a World Fair or a World Expo or something like that. You can visit it. Maybe there are a few people who are there every day, and maybe there are some people who live there. But technically, or like the Olympic Village, right? You have the Olympic Village, but then you have the Olympics, and so it's much more similar to that, because the residents who are going to be on campus are only 50 to 70 people. Their experience is not going to be the dominant thing, even though of course it's important, but it's concomitant to the idea that, hey, thousands of people are going to enter this space, and we want to allow them to experience something different, help them accelerate and engage with these different levels in what we consider to be the longevity challenge. And so, I think we learned about, bringing some of the convergence of concerns, designing some of the day-to-day for the community. And that's been really helpful from folks like Nicholas and Lawrence, who've also been involved and given us feedback and helped with Vitalist Bay. But by and large, the way we think about it is primarily as this place where anybody can go. They don't need to be a resident. They can just come visit the Bay Area, or maybe they live in the Bay Area, and they can spend a day or 3 days or 7 days or whatever amount of time they feel comfortable coming during the day. They don't need to sleep there, and being given the tools and the permission and the context to dream big and to tie the pieces that are currently so fragmented. And so that's really, I would say, the big difference there. It's a zone. It's a kind of attempt at something I think that's pretty new.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that answer, Adam. And I really like this approach of the longevity zone, especially given my own situation. So I live across the Sierra Nevada mountains in northern Nevada, and I will be in a set of circumstances professionally where I couldn't really take weekdays off of work, but I could during the weekends go to Vitalist Bay and hopefully see many of the speakers during the main conferences and also connect with people during the weekends. And this ability to kind of go back and forth, come whenever one is able to, and benefit from the events there, the people who happen to be there, I think is a major attractor. And yes, in order to have a culture, an active movement of longevity, one needs to have hubs like this where people can find something pretty much on demand, at least a wide variety of activities or others to connect with. That is what keeps a movement alive. So now we have some questions from our friend Alan Crowley. Let me pose the first one. He notes there are a bunch of super qualified speakers and leading experts in longevity at Vitalist Bay. The event may be sold out, but the ideas might still not be reaching the general public. And my observation has been similar, that even though there is more news coverage of longevity now than certainly 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, a lot of people are still perhaps so immersed in their day-to-day lives or the headline news items of this week or the past 24 hours that they're not nearly as aware of progress and opportunities in the field of longevity as they should be. So
Yeah.
Alan wonders, is there any effort to coordinate these speakers getting out to the general public as well?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that question. So the answer is yes and yes. There are two, I'd say, important levels to this. One is capturing great footage and great content during the event. This is definitely a priority for us. We're already working with an AV team and so forth, and so that'll be one aspect of it. The other aspect is leveraging media. So that has one, I would say, a mainstream media perspective, and I can't name names, but substantial major media outlets, both TV and print and online, are already engaged and interested in covering the event to different degrees. So some people may want to send one of their members, representatives, to be there for an entire day or a conference, or more others in different ways. So we're definitely engaging on that front, and we intend to continuously publish content as the event is ongoing. With that being said, I wonder to what degree we can leverage the content. This is still something we haven't, I would say, yet concluded in a way where we make some of it public, maybe we stream some of it, but we leverage that to engage with people by either collecting their emails or connecting with them somehow. So now they will be more of a part of the general community that's interested in this category, such that they can be engaged further. And I think it's a really important thing to think about. It's one of the balls that we're juggling.
Well, Adam, I'd like to follow up on that. That's perhaps something that you could do would be to have the folks that show up and attend or speak sign up as a speakers list for if they're willing to speak in the future with podcast, with USTP Salon, with other events, and maybe Joe Rogan, whoever does these communicative events outside of your own realm and your own generated content, which sounds like a great plan, what you're doing.
Yeah.
But also, they each have something to say on their own that can contribute to the general population. I think it might be nice to have that shotgunned out, across the globe or the country, and various podcasts or news interviews, and maybe a speakers bureau for longevity speakers.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote down. I think it's a brilliant idea. And it's the kind of need which is going to be increasingly in demand because longevity is touching so many aspects of human society. And I suspect that there will be more and more groups which say, oh, well, I need a speaker about longevity, or I need a panel. And maybe I want a few lenses into it, be it the regenerative medicine or the cryopreservation or whatever it is. And it would be wonderful to be able to connect the dots there. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, sure. I would love to call one source and get a list of speakers.
Yes, indeed. And Alan's question has sparked some creative suggestions from our viewers. So Daniel Tweed writes, couldn't a permanent version of Vitalist Bay be inhabited as a virtual cyberspace city, perhaps to increase the accessibility over time? And Jason Geringer has a recommendation. You should have people giving tours on Twitch and YouTube, and the live chats would tell the person where to go, like a virtual presence device. So thank you to both Daniel and Jason for those recommendations. I also want to pose the second question from Alan, which is how do the blue zones fit in with Vitalist Bay and these pop-up cities? And the blue zones are a set of geographical areas that are at least alleged to have higher than statistically normal concentrations of centenarians and supercentenarians. Places like the island of Ikaria in Greece, or Sardinia, or Okinawa, or Loma Linda, California. And those are places where demographers have observed at least reported greater prevalence of longevity. Recently, some doubts have been cast on that with regard to how accurate those records might be, or how stable are those blue zones, perhaps in some areas as they come to have more contact with, let's say, the mainstream world, lifespans tend to approach more general averages. But the blue zones are phenomena that don't seem to be dependent on there being an explicit pro-longevity movement there. It is at least alleged that the lifestyle practices in those areas are more conducive to greater longevity. But would you say, Adam, there is some sort of relation or inspiration taken from the blue zones, at least insofar as there could be aspects of community that promote greater longevity?
Yeah, the way this expresses itself in the Vitalist Bay case seems to me more about the residents. So if you have 50 people who are staying there for the duration, would those people, given the affordances of the venue, which, you know, I didn't mention this, but there's going to be a 15-person sauna, cold plunges, there's a pretty great gym on campus. There will be all these testing opportunities, and as noted, the ability to give blood and get that tested and so forth. So, you know, these are the kind of things people don't have just at their beck and call typically. You know, even people who are quite wealthy don't have this setup necessarily, let alone the community of like-minded people who could encourage you and kind of provide that context. So I feel like for those who are residents, this will indeed be or is intended to be the healthiest, most productive 2 months of their lives, which would maximize their lifespan and health span potential as it is. And so, yes, in that sense, yes, but, you know, because there's so much of this, which is about the other people who are attending, I can't say that would be the singular focus. It's one of the things that will be happening.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, I do see how many people will take the opportunity, as they have done at other extended longevity events, be they the pop-up cities or, say, RadFest, to do something to improve their own health and perhaps pick up some healthier habits. Now, we also have a question from Zach Richardson. He writes, you had said at the beginning that humans have agency, and so it is important to try hard. You're clearly a guy who tries hard. What is the driving force behind your trying? Is it fear of death, love of life, just plain interest in the science? And then Zach follows up stating, do you ever try to raise up the level of people you see who aren't really trying hard to hit longevity, escape velocity, or do you just let them be and focus on those who get it, so to speak? What are your thoughts on that set of questions, Adam?
Yeah, thank you. Well, this touches the heart of the matter. And so speaking for myself is easy. Speaking to how to engage with others, I think, is a work in progress, but I'll address both. So for myself, my primary motivating factor is to understand why are we here? So what is reality? Of course, I fear pain, and I fear death. I get the knot in my stomach when I think about it, probably as much as the next person. But it's not my primary motivator. I think it's rational, of course, to fear things that are undesirable. There's nothing unusual about that. For me, the thing is that, you know, we're all born into this world. We don't know anything when we're born, and then we're trying to figure things out. and life is so interesting and miraculous, and it's just absurd to accept the that book ending without seeing the next chapters and trying to understand. I mean, what is this all about? I mean, think how crazy that is. To me, it's almost inconceivable that people go about their days and are not constantly, multiple times a day thinking, but why are we here? What is this thing that we're engaging in? This reality. And so that's my primary motivator, to engage better so that we can understand, so that I can personally understand and experience reality to a greater degree, and understand the great questions of existence, the greater mysteries. That's my motivator. And in terms of like engaging with others, um, look, I'm not a professional salesperson. Of course, I've done sales as a founder. You got to do sales to raise money for your company, to convince people to join you in the companies that I've done. And so, I try to typically understand people's concerns and meet them where they are, but not give up on the fundamentals. So, what do I mean by that? This has to do with another question, which is the theory of change. So, if you believe that you need to convince the mass, you really need certain types of communication and channels that are going to reach a mass audience, and you need a message which is appropriate, which you think will push people along some sort of avenue that will end up in some change that you want to see, whether a resource allocation change or a regulatory change or some other change that you want to see. And the reason I mention that is because my current best theory of change is that we probably need to get a rather small number of people, but who are very high leverage, more similar to what the tech libertarians did in trying to influence the US government. You could say, oh, it only cost Elon Musk $44 billion for Twitter, plus another $3 billion in electoral efforts or thereabouts. Plus, they have a deep bench of the tech community who was willing to jump in and staff government positions. Obviously, this is insanely difficult. I don't know that the longevity community could come up with that kind of bench or those kind of resources. But I think that's our best bet. I don't think people are going to move and establish an electoral majority, even though I thought that might be plausible. What I've learned in the last year and a half is that only one of 50 or so very motivated vitalists is willing to consider moving, and those numbers just don't add up. We can't get the numbers to get electoral influence by just voting and moving to some location. I don't believe that's feasible. I mean, I'm open to be convinced otherwise. And so then you got to ask yourself, okay, well, what about other strategies? Like, Brian Johnson is building a movement, but it's really going more to the mass, and it's doing it based on selling health in the here and now, pure health in the here and now. Take this supplement, feel good in your body, sleep well. Nothing wrong with any of those things. Obviously, I try to do them for myself, and I recommend them for others as well. But would that potentially end up in moving resources in a dramatic way? I think there's a huge question mark around that. So I wonder about that theory of change. And that's why I gravitate to the previous theory of change that I described. Now, with that being said, what does that mean? It has implications about who you try to direct your message to. If you're looking for a relatively small number of people who have very high leverage, you're going to either try to get into those positions of leverage, people who are already aligned, or convince people who are borderline aligned. Maybe they're a billionaire and they're not quite, a vitalist or a transhumanist, but they're kind of open to those ideas. You would focus on those people. And so that's a roundabout way to get to the answer to this question of what kind of message would you use? Because these audiences are so different. For somebody who is more, I would say, the mainstream, you would use a message of saying, hey, listen, you don't like sick here, right? It doesn't make sense to wait until you're unwell to then take action. Look at this ridiculous system. We're spending so much money, and then we're giving kids slop in elementary school and harming their metabolism. So no wonder we're then, quote unquote, surprised that somebody is obese at 30 and starts getting cardiovascular issues or diabetes. Certainly, the mass market in the US understands that message and largely resonates with it. And this is part of like the Make America Healthy Again movement, but it's actually not partisan. I think both parties in the US have large constituencies that see that. And so you just extend that message and say, well, look, guess what? Aging is just like that. It's just another type of sick care. Why do we wait until we're already aged? And then in the late stage pathologies of aging, suddenly everybody wakes up. What if we could just delay that aging process or maybe stop it completely? And then we wouldn't have to wake up at the last minute and pour $300 billion a year on the last 3 years of life, which is what we do today. And what I also like to tie to is to say, look, you may be 35 and you're sitting there and you're saying, how does aging relate to me? I'm only going to be aged in 40 years. And you tell them, well, today, the US budget, or actually this is true of any higher income economy, the UK, Sweden, Germany, anywhere else, Japan too, spends about 30 to 40% on entitlements. And those entitlements are basically us subsidizing people who are no longer economically viable in society through Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And so you tell that person that you are currently, your taxes, your income taxes, are quite literally paying for aging right now. And if we didn't have those costs of aging, your income tax, which by the way in the US represents only about a quarter of the federal spending annually, a quarter is income tax, your income tax could go to zero if we didn't have the cost of aging. And that would happen right now. So you choose to spend on aging right now with your tax dollars by not doing anything about it, and you're not actually producing any better outcome. And so it's just nonsensical, especially because we know the science shows us that you can live longer if we spend the money and the attention in the right places. So that would be kind of my mainstream argument. For people who are already more motivated towards longevity, escape velocity, or other ideas like that, I would just say, well, look, what is your mental model for how to deploy your energy, your money, your time towards this? And then by learning what their mental models are, I can maybe assist in thinking, okay, what is the venue that would satisfy your interest? Some people, they may have time or money, but they don't like philanthropy because they're strongly libertarian or capitalist minded. Well, in that case, I'm not going to suggest that they donate to A4LI or some other, charity. I'm going to suggest that maybe they should invest in a company or maybe in a fund or something like that. And by getting them to do something, now they are more aligned, they're more engaged. And so I would try those kind of strategies to get them over the hump to become activated. I don't know if that's fully comprehensive, but those are two core ways that I try to communicate.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. You kind of like have to base it a little bit on your audience, knowing what you do. But yeah, I like what you said about getting key people into power. That's definitely something you'd see the techno-libertarians working on, and that's something I tend to align more in that camp myself. Although it's funny, having a Discord server called the US Transhumanist Party, we tend to get quite a lot of people on other sides of the political spectrum too. And the main concern I seem to continue hearing from them is, okay, all these rich guys are going to live forever. Great. I'd be like Brian Johnson if I had millions of dollars. Wish I could live forever if I had that.
Yes.
But then they said, what about me? I'm just the little guy. How is this going to help me? And why are we, having all this go to these rich guys? And, I don't get anything. And I think that's a little fallacious since there is a lot of trickle down technology. But I was wondering what your response would be to that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I would basically describe that as equity, access, fairness, and so forth. And those are really core ideas. Often they're represented by a particular political wing in the respective community or country, more than another political wing or other political wings. I'd say that at the end of the day, we really want to think about the well-being of the population as the concern here. So if you extend this, you would say, well, okay, look, it's not really about like the specific cost of a specific intervention. It's about how many people can benefit, and what are we doing for the benefit of public health, for the benefit of the maximum number of people, just like wanting to lift people out of poverty or affording people with opportunity or education that would allow them, some better playing field to go in and self-actualize. And I think a lot of people resonate with the idea that that kind of thing is a good thing in a society. And so the argument that I would make there is that you can't it's not it doesn't hold water to argue that you shouldn't invest in science because the fruits of science may be initially unequally distributed. Because right now there's a great amount of suffering, and essentially one of this kind of branches off or intersects with a few concerns. So one concern is this idea that, okay, what can actually increase the size of the pie? When you're thinking about, equity, there's an unfortunate line of reasoning which says, well, if we invest in increasing the size of the pie, we may not be more equitably distributing the pie right now. And there's an inherent tension there, right? Because science and technology, they increase the size of the overall pie, but they require investment initially, and they may have different kind of unequal spillover effects at the beginning, right? People typically may have more access to things that are technological advancements early on if they have money, and or for different reasons it may not be available to everybody. That's been the history of innovation typically. But in increasing the size of the pie, which I would call as a structural change, is generally better for humanity than more equitably distributing a fixed pie, right? Because ultimately administrative changes, let's just imagine you do have the best government in history and they equitably distribute an existing pie. The problem is that whoever is in charge may be replaced by exactly the opposite, right? And then you essentially have the same size pie, but now you have an administrator who is either, some dictator or some horrible person who just gives all of the benefit to the oligopolists that, are at their table. And obviously, if you increase the size of the pie, well, that genie is usually out of the bottle. Like, it's very hard to put like the vaccine genie back in the bottle. Humanity, there's no country in the world that says, let's just go back and like completely not vaccinate people from polio. I mean, despite the critiques of RFK are, like, he's not suggesting that. Like, typically science and people would go and vaccinate even if the government said like you don't have to, because science is just a structural change. And so I think that kind of line of concern is usually a confabulation. It's kind of a deflection, because really what we look at today is that we spend hundreds of billions of dollars. This is a fact. We're already doing it, except we're doing it with very low return. And so if you want to be a good steward of public capital and a good steward of public health, you would say, well, listen, forget about, the concerns about like some imaginary scenario where there is some new therapeutic and how do we equally distribute it? Today, right now, we are deploying hundreds of billions of dollars, and are we getting a good return for it? Is somebody's grandma going to live longer because of it? Are you going to live longer and healthier because of it? And if the answer to that is no, it's a preliminary question that we've already failed, and we need to address that first. And so, I'm sensitive to these equity concerns. I think that we need to be on the lookout for them, but we are so far away from them today in the way that we allocate resources and deal with this issue that I find them to be usually a deflection.
Okay, that's interesting. I had one last thing I wanted to ask, which was, it sort of came to an idea. You mentioned there was a huge issue with, this is sort of a totally different thing, but you mentioned there was an issue with data collection for being able to get enough data and like send, so that would be a case where we would draw a lot of people's blood.
Yeah.
But one thing I never understood is, I mean, what's going on right now is we have so much passive gathering of data and passive surveillance with, everything we click on Facebook and it going to another website. But then we also had a little bit of pushback on that law with like some different data privacy laws. And now every company I've ever been to, I'll get random packet out of somewhere. Oh, we've been breached, But I had an idea, which I was wondering, and I've heard some other people say this, why are we not being paid for our data if like there's already some protections for it? Say it's something like HIPAA data. Couldn't I just sign a release to say, so I use sequencing.com because they use next gen sequencing, and I found some neat SNPs with me, but it seems interesting, like sequencing could just be able to say, we'll give you another free test, or we'll give you a month of access membership if you offer your data to this company. And then it could either be, each company that uses my data would then, pay 10 cents for it or whatever. But I just thought something like that. Why don't we monetize people's data if it's so valuable?
I mean, I agree that that's a good question. The next question will be, how do you kickstart such a platform or product in a way that would create sufficient value to motivate the kind of investment to spread it and make it sustainable financially? And what I've seen is that has so far been a complete failure. So to give an example, let's just walk through this from a product development perspective. So, okay, so you and I sit down, we say, all right, let's found an initiative to do this. So we set up a website and we set up some app or whatever where we can collect data from people, or we allow people to upload their data, or we allow them to connect via API, or maybe we do a B2B deal where we go to clinics and we say, hey, listen, give me your data. And, when you take in a patient, just get them to check off some release. Most patients won't even notice. They'll check it off. And then give me their anonymized data or something like that, right? I mean, nothing nefarious, right? It's going to be anonymized and all that stuff. And we start collecting that data. How much data, how good will it be? And how long will it take us to collect a sufficient amount of data where we could actually monetize it in any possible way? I think the problem is that the scope that you need to get to as a milestone to monetize it is actually really quite substantial. And the money exists in, for example, orphan diseases, places that can really be monetized with therapeutics and so forth, like the pharma money. And getting that kind of data is hard. Like everybody's chasing the cancer doctors who are treating a specific rare cancer. It's not just you, it's the pharma people who are already talking to them 24/7 and so forth. And so the result of that is that when you try to collect biodata in that way and create the motivator as rewarding people for the data, that the platforms don't have a system to get to a sufficient scale. And then what happens is the people working on them, namely you and me in this imaginary case, after working on it for 2 years, we're just like out of money. And we're like, oh shit, we somehow need to feed ourselves. And,
okay, scratch it. I'm done. I don't want to do this.
It's just complicated, but don't get me wrong. I do think there's flesh on that bone. It's just you need to have some unique data access or some specific type of monetization strategy, which can give you the flywheel to scale. And so far, nobody's figured it out. And yeah, exactly. CureDAO has been working on. That's right. And so far, I don't believe they figured it out. So this is a hard problem. I have some ideas about it, which if anybody wants to talk about, feel free to ping me, just DM me on Twitter or whatever, offline. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you for your answers.
Yeah. Thank you for those responses. They were excellent. And Jason also commented that these were brilliant answers. I can say I thoroughly sympathize with your motivation for living longer. I tend to be the kind of person who will explore particular subject areas or places or activities very intensively. And I find there's a perpetual shortage of time to do that. And especially with how limited our lifespans are, it's not just that there aren't enough hours in the day, there are not nearly enough years in a typical lifetime to do all of these activities and to fathom so much of the world, to understand different fields of human endeavor, to get answers to interesting questions. And I cannot believe that anybody would be content with 80 years or 100 years or 120 years. Now, on the subject of communication strategies, different strategies being suitable to different audiences based both on their level of engagement and current alignment, as well as what they could contribute to the movement. I agree with you there as well. And this has sparked some comments also in terms of how to allocate our time among various potential recipients of our message. So Alan wonders, given that fishing for minnows or whales is each a viable plan for feeding, which way do we choose, or do we go for both? And our friend Danila Immortalist wonders, why do you think Sam Altman doesn't attend events like this, like Vitalist Bay or other longevity conferences, especially given his interest in longevity? He has invested in retro biosciences, for instance, and he is, at least philosophically, mostly aligned with us. So Danilo wonders, what would it take to change that so that the people of means and influence who are most of the way there in terms of agreeing with many of our goals and being willing to be at least somewhat ambitious will be in our community and very actively helping out the projects in our community.
So my answer to both those questions is pretty simple. One, going for the whales seems to be the better strategy. Regarding Sam Altman, or a few others, but Sam is I think a great example. And I don't know Sam personally. I have a bunch of mutual friends with him. But if you're in his position, just imagine the following. Number one, you are probably absolutely overwhelmed with trying to scale OpenAI, let alone other stuff you're involved in. I'm talking about like levels of scale of inbound and things you need to deal with that are probably unfathomable to most people because they're not in that position. And so if you think you can influence a lot of levers, you have to be extremely decisive and deliberate about which levers you dedicate your also extremely finite attention to. And so then the question is, what is your mental model? And I'll describe a few mental models that would convince me, if I were in Sam's shoes, not to attend these kind of events, or at least to be very careful with my time. Maybe attending them, very sporadically or limited ways. Okay, case number one. I believe that I am worth $5 billion today, and if I focus, I could be worth $50 billion in 5 years. And so that's the kind of like earn to give or earn to live mentality in this case, which EA has promulgated, right? So I will be in a much higher position of leverage, and this could be a justifiable strategy, even if I were selling furniture, not actually creating the super intelligence that may also solve biology. So let's just take that as kind of one mental model. I may actually get much higher financial leverage by what I'm doing now and doubling down on that full force. Number two, I'm not an expert in biology. And so who will I trust? There are 1,000 people out there who are all saying, Sam, trust me. I'm the expert in biology. Just invest in my thing. Just donate to my thing. And this will be the path to success. And I don't know who to trust. So what do? I'm going to go with Joe Betts, who I've known for 10 years and I trust. And I'm just going to say, hey, Joe, I trust you. You will be the steward of my efforts in this category. And we'll work collaboratively to the degree that I can afford my attention, because I have so many other things going on to accelerate things. And just consider me as your key ally, so that when you want to raise that $1 billion, there will be somebody to help you raise that $1 billion, which supposedly Retro is raising right now. And I can only imagine that Sam is being supportive and helpful in that, right? So if you think like, is it better for Sam to attend like 20 events, or is it better in a year where he would share his thoughts, but maybe not get that much benefit directly himself? Or is it better for him to scale OpenAI or scale whatever thing he is doing so that he could actually help Joe get $1 billion within 2 or 3 years. Okay, so that's a second question. And then a third mental model would be, all right, well, AI may solve biology or different aspects of biology, which is, by the way, one of the reasons that probably Retro is giving for the new fundraise, right? The fact that they use this model based on OpenAI, where they have a special relationship, obviously, because Sam is the core investor of Retro, and they demonstrated that they could get these different factors to work more effectively than Yamanaka factors by a factor of 50x, is what they announced publicly or whatever. So if you believe that AI would have a considerable impact on biology directly, then you would just press the gas as hard as humanly imaginable on AI. And if that's your expertise and not biology, well, you would absolutely just focus on your expertise. Do what you're strong at, and don't focus on somewhere you're weak. You would just find other people to support if you can do that. And so I think those are all great reasons for Sam not to be spending that much of his time on longevity. I think they're rational reasons. The jury is still out as to whether where we are in this story. So I just want to lay that out a little bit very concretely. So yeah, Joe's working on reprogramming, among other things. They're kind of bringing what they say is a startup mentality to biology innovation with a focus on extending healthy life by a minimum of 10 years. That's their stated goal. But I think their desired goal is much greater and very much aligned with Vitalist ideas and other ideas. I don't think they're limiting themselves. There are different types of communication that they feel are best for what they're doing. But what I would add here is that, look, the big question that we contend with is, what is AI going to be in 5 or 10 years? And how old am I? So let's just imagine a scenario. In 10 years, we have ASI and 500 million to a billion embodied AIs, many of them in humanoid form. So they're literally everywhere. Robots, like you would imagine from iRobot or Isaac Asimov series, etc. They're everywhere. They're smarter than you. They're stronger than you. They're more precise than you. They don't need to sleep at all, and you have large amounts of energy. As you know, the U.S. alone is building like a huge amounts of energy infrastructure. And so you have energy that may be too cheap to meter. Maybe we get fusion in 10 years. And now you have these embodied AIs everywhere. You have essentially ASI level intelligence, which is also too cheap to meter. And I mean, like, you got to ask yourself, if that is the world that we are hurtling towards, if you think the probability of that, without doing anything different except pressing the gas for AI, do you believe that it makes sense to slave in a lab with pipettes right now in any way, shape, or form? Somebody might say this is just a waste of your time. All you need to do is just press the gas, and maybe what Dan Elton and I were discussing earlier around, like, okay, how do we actually feed the AIs so the AIs can do the stuff faster? But arguably, with energy too cheap to meter and intelligence too cheap to meter and embodied AIs in the form of robots, I mean, they'll just build it themselves. So yeah, on year 10, they'll have no automated labs. And on year 11, the entire state of Texas will just be one big automated lab with everything you can imagine, just working 24/7, collecting samples, collecting data, and they'll figure out what data they need to collect. So I feel like there are a lot of people who believe that we are on the precipice of this kind of energy and intelligence explosion. And maybe for wishful thinking or for other reasons, they assign a rather high probability for that outcome. And therefore, and maybe Sam is among them, maybe not, certainly people who work on something often have a larger weight, towards that thing that they're working on, just by kind of the nature of them putting their attention there, outside of whether that is the appropriate weight. And I'm not saying it isn't. It's just that that's a human tendency. And so I think a lot of the people working on AI are more predisposed to having that view that we are on the precipice of something like that. So Dario Amodei, Demis Hassabis, Sam Altman, they're probably all vitalists. or transhumanist or whatever. They probably all are, and they want this to happen. I mean, why else would he say like doubling lifespans in 5 years wouldn't be crazy? I mean, that is like an insane thing for somebody who is leading a company that could, soon be a public company to say. Think about that in terms of the Overton window compared to like 10, 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago. So I suspect that that's the majority case in this. And then there's some other group, which is, I would say, some lesser set, which is like, okay, maybe your mental model is that it's not necessarily going to happen, but it is imperative that the AI of the future is more influenced by the good guys, quote unquote. Everybody thinks they're the good guys. Sam thinks that, Dario thinks that, the US thinks that, China thinks that, but they feel, a lot of those people feel that we are in this kind of AI race. And therefore, it is imperative to, quote unquote, win the race. And that's also a different mental model. It says AI will not necessarily fully solve the biology and longevity, but I must spend all my time just ensuring we win this race because we're the good guys. And for longevity to be a priority in the way that I think is right, we need to win the race. And so that is also a perspective that would motivate somebody to just not worry about it right now. And
wait,
so I think
one sec. Win the race? What do you mean? Go back 10 seconds.
Win the race with AI. So let's say you imagine that in the next 5 years, all war, or let's say in the next 10 years, all war will be conducted by AIs, right? Because why would you use a human to guide a plane when an AI can do it more precisely, more effectively, more powerfully, and so forth, right? So if there's going to be, if essentially future war is AI war, then and you believe that humans are still going to be these unfortunate chimpanzee politics level beings, then you may believe that there could be an unavoidable conflict where now, I mean, like, right, like, why doesn't the China just take over Taiwan? Because they believe that there would be negative military or other ramifications to that. Why doesn't Russia just try to take over Ukraine? Oh, oops, it is trying to take over Ukraine, right? Despite the insane ramifications, like 1 million people dead or some crazy shit like that. So this is already happening. Now, just imagine you take this to another level where now the AI dominance integrated with the military makes you know with what you believe is extremely high certainty that in a physical confrontation, your AI will dominate the other person's AI. And it's fully evident. Whoever controls that AI, if they are, some sort of Machiavellian sociopathic actor, which unfortunately in international politics, I think it's pretty safe to assume that every state is acting as a Machiavellian sociopathic actor. And so if this is going to happen, then you can just imagine, right? Like whoever has the most influence is going to then also dominate the entire earth. And I think some of these people do believe that this is a probable outcome in the next 10 years. And they think that they're the good guys. Everybody thinks that they're the good guys. And so everybody is trying to hurl towards that dominance as soon as possible without regard for anything else. Because if you lose that race, you will not have any ability to influence what comes next.
Thank you, Adam. That was quite an insightful answer. And I think one of the most detailed answers in terms of providing a window into how some of these high net worth, high influence, and somewhat aligned individuals may think about the allocation of their time and resources. And certainly some of those perceptions are ones that we will need to work on because, of course, as the Transhumanist Party, we would hope that human decision-making be made on criteria other than Machiavellian or sociopathic ones. So one area in which we are trying to make a difference is how to influence, let's say, criteria of decision-making that are more focused on overall human well-being. Now, in the 6 or so minutes that we have remaining, I would like to have Ben and Art Ramon get to ask their questions if possible. So let's start with Ben.
Thanks for coming today, Adam. Good to see you again. I will ask my silly question. On average, how many, we're going to take it back to Vitalist Bay. On average, how many aha moments can you guarantee on a daily basis? And will they just be whatever, everyone knew that? Or will there be some that are actually like, no one ever thought of that before?
Well, it depends for whom, right? I think really what you're asking, the kind of counterpart to that question is, how sophisticated are the attendees going to be? So if somebody has an extremely wide view and is very sophisticated, I don't know, maybe they'll have one aha moment a week because they'll be meeting with people who have specialized expertise that they're just not aware of, right? Even if they're just talking to one of the speakers or somebody else who's doing some cutting edge work in whatever area. I think for people who are more focused on their specific area, which is also not a aspersion towards anybody. It's just that people are busy, right? I think they'll get multiple aha moments probably every day of a conference because they're being exposed to stuff that they typically are not experts at. And that's what we're trying to encourage. And I will say that we are working with the speakers to also cover areas that we feel are underexplored. So not only are we trying to bring a mix of speakers, but also think about that. And in terms of the attendees, I suspect that it's probably going to be something like, 35% or so longevity people, quote unquote, meaning people are already in the space in some way. And then maybe another third or so who are longevity curious. And what I mean by that is people who are, let's say, longevity inclined, but never really spent that much time on it. So maybe they saw one talk and they said, oh yeah, this is cool, and I want to learn more, and I resonate with these ideas. But they're not, this is not somebody who just wants to have better biomarkers, okay? I'm talking about somebody who actually is interested in living longer substantially, is interested in some of these bigger ideas, but is not part of the, let's say, existing community. They haven't gone maybe to other events, or maybe they went to one event or something like that. And then I think a third will just be what I would call curious, incidental visitors. So in other words, people who, they hear, oh, wow, this is pretty interesting. I live in Berkeley. It's right down the street. Maybe I go to Berkeley, University or whatever, or I live in the Bay Area. Maybe I'm an investor and I actually don't care that much for longevity, but maybe I'll learn something at Investors Week. So I care for it in the sense that I know it's a big trend and I want to get educated. And so I go there. Obviously, I'm not saying this as any type of critique of any type of group, but that's my guess. I don't know if that's going to be the case. And by the way, if you or anybody listening has an idea for how we can create more aha moments, DM me. We want as many as possible.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that answer, Adam. And for those of our members who want to contribute to the aha moments or experience them, remember you have the opportunity to get $100 off your registration by entering the code USTP Bay. And if you answer USTP to the question, how did you hear about Vitalist Bay, you will be expedited through the wait list. Now, we have about a minute remaining. Art Ramon, do you have a question that could be answered in a minute's time?
Not so much a question, just going back to the AI race. It kind of reminds me of the argument of, do you build a generational starship or do you wait to build that near light speed starship? Because eventually you're going to surpass the generational starship if you wait to build the near light speed starship. But if an asteroid hits the planet while you're building the near light speed starship, you're not going to have either. So it seems it would be rather best to just build both. So that's just a comment.
Yes. Thank you very much, Art Ramon. And Adam, Would you like to offer any final words during the last 30 seconds or so of our salon?
Yeah, I want to say thank you for everybody who attended and for all those awesome questions. And I want to encourage anybody who wants to move the needle to somehow join us at Vitalist Bay and to spread the word to anybody who could be relevant. Because ultimately, if we want to take agency, we need to somehow get people in key positions or with key knowledge engaged and activated. And there's no better way to do that I can think of than creating this density of ideas and opportunity and people. And so I would love for you to join and work with us to do this. And if AI gods don't save us, then we really need another strategy. And I think this is it. So.
Absolutely. And we will have many more fascinating conversations about the strategy for how we defeat aging and death. Thank you very much, Adam. And hopefully I and many others here will see you at Vitalist Bay, and we can all live long and prosper.